Eric. First, I don't know why we have so much controversy, but basically, I want to publicly state an apology to you. Honestly, that's what I want to start with right now.
You never need to apologize to me, but I'll accept it either way.
Yeah, so I think I do because we had a last episode that was a duo a little while back where you dropped a nugget, you dropped a bomb, quite frankly, on everyone. The framework for progression when it comes to hypertrophy, talking about a first principles standpoint, and you did such a good job. And if you're not part of MASS Monthly Application Strength Sports, you should be, and you nailed it. But there's one minor thing that happened during that episode that I feel if we don't address it, the trolls are just going to always be talking about it. And that is, of course, at the beginning of the episode, we try to make a pivot where I said sexual health with Dr. Eric Helms, PhD. And obviously you said, hey, we're here today to talk about erectile dysfunction. And you said how you have it. And that, and then afterwards, when we closed that segment, you said, of course, I don't have it. But as a friend, I didn't do enough to confirm that you don't have it. And I feel that, sometimes, not that being silent is being complicit in this case, but I, as your friend, I always got your back in more ways than one. And I kind of just, Eric, I was there and I nodded my head, but I didn't positively affirm. And so I just want to make a public declaration now that I have on, very good authority that Eric is a very virile individual, and that once again, on good authority, I'm not going to spoil anything, Eric, or anyone's, private life or whatnot. But in high school, I heard that there was a vicious rumor when you would LARP. You were known as Sir Dumbledonk. And of course, that's from Dumbledore, Harry Potter. And as we know, Eric, playing D&D, what's a level 1 spell for a mage? Stone Skin. And so everyone was just astounded at how rock hard my man can get. And this isn't even, hyperbole on my part. This is an accepted fact in the NorCal area of Eric Stone Skin Helms. And so I kind of blanked. To be frank, I think I was post-workout when we did that. And so I didn't do enough as your friend. And I still don't think I've done enough, but I hope you can accept this apology and just, as always, stay rock hard in a funky place, my friend.
Yeah, so for the listeners, I think you can take two things away from this introduction. One,
Right.
You now know that we don't coordinate and plan them sometimes.
Yeah.
That sometimes Omar just says, hey, go with this. And I make the mistake of saying, sure. And the second thing you can know is that if you got the reference to Stone Skin, and you know that is in fact a Dungeons & Dragons spell, you're not alone. But yes, you should be ashamed. Yeah, and I think with that, we can talk about how we come up with the decisions we make to make content.
And Eric's going to say, after this,
segue.
I think for Iron Culture, we're going to have to do a more formal review of how we come up with the content creation process. Just saying that if you say, Omar, hey, go with it, I probably shouldn't just say yes blindly whenever you say that. But
there might be some slight amendments to the process from here on out.
Improvisation, sometimes it affects everyone differently. Sometimes people, they get a little uncomfortable when we get into the deep waters, but I just wanted it to be known, and that is why today I think we can have an interesting conversation being on their social media for the past decade. You were first, and see, this is where I first became aware of Eric from Matt Ogus's video, circa maybe 2012. Am I getting that right, around Eric?
I want to say there were some in 2011. Okay. But yeah, I think some of the big ones were after a season in the off season in 2012. Yeah, that was the inflection point of where I became, the only way you can know you exist is if you're talked about on the internet.
Right.
So,
yeah. The first thing I thought when I saw you, besides that's a muscular lad right there, is this is a value add for the channel. And I think there is something to be said about how a major value add, and that's no knock against anyone. I mean, there just is only one Eric. And so I think having a frank conversation about how we come up with content, because I think some people just think, okay, how do they make these Iron Culture? Sure, Eric has connections with the greatest PhDs when it comes to exercise science, but how do we even navigate these topics? How do we come up, for instance, for yourself when it comes to MASS, the articles you write, or for 3DMJ, or the entire content creation process over the last decade? And the other thing I think that'd be interesting for us to talk about would be curation, because that's an underrated aspect. And I could say one of the little big ups, one of the little brags I would say for the channel is for me curating the right so-called experts or guests in order to talk about a topic where it's like, you know what, there's someone else way more well-versed. Let's get them on. I think the whole process, Eric, of having a good DJ, so to speak, and I can say what a profound difference, and we know this, you're a hip-hop head, what that makes. You respect someone's opinion. So let's say art, movies, whatnot. Let's say you like a director. Well, I want to know what films he recommends. A hip-hop head. Oh, I respect this person. I want to know who they're bringing on. So the same idea. It's not only about creating the content, it's also about kind of raising other people up. And I think you've done an excellent job when it comes to your platform. I know you're in the academic space. So I think a peek behind the curtain, the Iron Curtain, so to speak, no pun intended. Yes, we call it critiques of capitalism, but we don't mean that Iron Curtain, would be very interesting. And so you've been in the game for, were you on a MISC, the bodybuilding forum? Am I getting, no, not MISC, the bodybuilding forum. So I'm getting it wrong. A decade ago, was it 2009? Just give me the rundown, man.
Oh, geez. So much to unpack there.
Yeah.
For one, if we do want to critique capitalism, probably going with the Iron Curtain is going to hurt our cause.
Yep.
Things didn't turn out too well behind that curtain. But I will say, lots of good points. Curation versus creation, and what you're talking about, like platforming people, and knowing, knowing enough to know who is the perfect person to talk about a given topic. I think that's something I think that you do really well, and it's something I strive to do, especially here at Iron Culture. And it does require a lot of thought. I think people probably, maybe they don't know how much back and forth we discuss in email, text, and on Instagram, just because we like to communicate at the same time on 3 platforms, who we want to get on for what topics. But anyway, yeah, so I was on the bodybuilding.com forums starting in 2005. And I was on there pretty consistently all the way through, maybe 2012. And I was not a big part of the MISC, because the MISC is basically where all the trolls are. And I'm going to stand by that. I just triggered a bunch of old school people. I even triggered some of my friends. Yeah. And you know what? Just sit in your triggeredness. It's true. You're a troll. Deal with it. But where it really went down, this is before things could go down in the DMs. Right. There were actually PMs on the forums. Was the contest prep subforum on bodybuilding.com. That was kind of the proto social media, even though of course there was Instagram, Body Space, MySpace even, and not, sorry, I didn't mean Instagram, Facebook at that time. So yeah, that's where it all began for this lowly natty bodybuilder.
Bro, but see, that's what's so interesting, Eric, and I think people, not that they don't understand this, if you're not creating content, you maybe don't have that framework, but, you have all this information, you've continued to accumulate knowledge and information over time, but it's how you convey it, what platform you decide on. You're actually very prevalent, I would say, in the podcast space, where obviously people want to have you on. You're an authority, but it's like, how do you decide where you go on, what article you even decide to publish, what you talk about? I think all those choices and decisions would be a very interesting conversation. And I can just say that, once again, for myself, the entire process has changed over the last decade, but the core kind of like what are our principles that we're following here is always in some way, shape, or form to help enhance the lifter out there, help change kind of either their perspective or give them a tool, a tip, something, arm them with a piece of knowledge that will either immediately create a positive impact or maybe long-term if we talk about, their mental framework, so to speak. So that's been the core guiding principle, how that's manifested itself over time, like us launching this podcast. Guess what? Long-form content, us taking over the damn game. Eric, I'm not going to tease it, but we're sought after. Okay, there might be a company that said, "Hey, we're not going to pay you. We're not really going to do much for you. We're going to give you some tools, so to speak.
We're going to accelerate you.
Accelerate."
You could say.
So people have been noticing, but I think part of the content creation process, it kind of could be seemingly mysterious, and maybe this will not only help content creators out there, but those that digest the information. Because I know there's a lot of people, Eric. There's a lot of people that want to be you. Okay, a lot of it's like, oh wait, I got to go on PubMed right now. I got to get my, what's going on here? The Instagram, I got to get jacked. What is the process of being basically an accepted authority figure? And I think sometimes the one thing I'll say before we continue is it seems to me that individuals are more concerned about being taken seriously in quotation, so being seen as an authority figure. So they cannot be wrong. They're never wrong. They always conclusively have an opinion. And sometimes they'll overstep that boundary in an appeal to be seen as that person, as opposed to like, hey, how do I continue to provide good information, challenge some of my preconceived previous notions that I have, and continue putting out content that's going to help people. And I think that's one of the things I can say where you're an early first round draft pick. Oh yeah, I scouted your ass when I said you're a value add to that channel. But you're one of those investments that you've gotten just better with at over time. And I think this is no insult to anyone. But Eric, here's a fun fact. YouTube, barrier to entry, a lot lower. Sure. But some might argue you need a little personality, a little charisma. But did you know, my man, from 10 years ago, as an example, there ain't nobody besides probably Scott Herman that's still producing content from that period, because a lot of people don't evolve with the time. And even, Jeff Nippard, as an example, he was posting, creating content probably the last 7 to 8 years, but he figured out the formula that worked for him probably only in the last 3.5. So half of the time he was struggling. I wouldn't say struggling. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but not getting the size of the platform that he wanted. So for you to navigate over such a time course, typically content creators will have their peak, so to speak, like 2013, 2016, man, he's real popular on bodybuilding.com, or like, yeah, when he put out that book, like a book or whatever, that was kind of the statement piece he made. It's like, nah, my boy's not even peaking yet. He's actually just continuing to invest in that stuff. So it's awesome to see. And I knew I made the right choice. So here I am.
Well, let me just say thank you, because there was a lot of compliments. I'm uncomfortable with most of them, so I'll just do a little blanket thank you and then try to erase them all from my brain.
Yeah. I could go back to the Sir Dumbledore compliments if you prefer those instead.
No, we're good. We're good.
Oh,
let's move forward, never backward.
Okay, sure.
So I will say that yeah, there's one key feature that you said was, to be an authority figure, never be wrong. And I will say that I'm confident. I learned this from some of my early mentors, that I never have been wrong and never will be wrong.
Sure.
And if I am ever wrong, it's the other person's fault. So that's kind of a core guiding principle that I've used from the start. Sure. No, but in all seriousness, I think, the willingness to kind of roll with the changes that are coming out. Like you've talked about how the way you do, you're still on YouTube, and you've grown on YouTube, and you will continue to grow, and you've been consistently making content the whole time. There are some people who still have a channel on YouTube, like you said, but they're not there, or they had a 2-year hiatus, etc. I think you're one of the very few, like you said, and I think it's pretty clear to me, at least. I think you can see the same thing in yourself and others when it's present, that you have had a guiding principle and a goal that is kind of like the changes in the platform, the changes in the environment, the changes in the community, the changes in the fitness field, what's popular, what's focused on, they really have no impact on that guiding principle. And I think that is, I've done so many things poorly, inefficiently, not well. I can rationalize backwards and be like, oh, it's perfect. But I think the one thing I have done right is that I know what I'm doing and I know where I'm trying to get to. And I feel pretty fortunate for that. And because it's interesting, I think there's a lot of people who are much better innovators than I, who have accelerated at a much faster pace than I have my own growth. A good example, like, we talked about how the first time I got quote unquote like big time seen was Matt Ogus. And I think what Matt Ogus did that was really genius was at the right time when YouTube fitness was ready for growth, he looked at what was one of the more, I don't know if he did this consciously or not, or just this was what was kind of the zeitgeist, what was really popular on the forums, if we want to go back to that. Myself and Alberto Nunez, we had a ton of people we were interacting with through our logs. So we would have, because it was difficult to upload pictures, there was really no good social media platform for that, circa 2007 to like 2011. It was kind of pre-Instagram. You couldn't just bring your phone to the gym and record stuff. So one of the better mediums for just kind of sharing your experience was a blog. We go in and post every day our workout, maybe occasionally get a video or a picture, and just talk about our experience and then answer questions and interact with people. And the way it worked back in the day with the forums was that you'd have to close a post or a thread, you can say, once it got too many posts and views. And we would have to do this every couple of years because we had so many people following it. I don't remember the exact metrics, but it was It was we were a pretty big deal on the bodybuilding.com forums in our little niche circle of the contest prep area. So what I think Matt Ogus and others did was they took the concept of logging and they started doing vlogging. So Matt Ogus took this very same approach and said, and you can see it all. You can see my experiences. You can see the emotional changes. You can see the physical changes. You can see my revelations as now prepping for the first time using, at the time, what was some pretty, like revolutionary stuff like tracking macros and having a calorie deficit and using progressive overload. And we're talking 2011, 2012, and that just completely took off as far as how that worked with the YouTube scene. So I think it was somewhat serendipitous that I understood that model. I understood what he was doing. I saw him do it, and I happened to be his coach. He happened to be successful, and it happened to occur that he was like, hey, I'd love to do some Q&As with you. So because at that time, I would say I wasn't a true, consciously aware content creator. I was doing stuff that I thought was cool and sharing my own journey as an athlete and coaching. So because I was a nerd, I had a monthly blog post about, something sciencey related to bodybuilding, and I was in school and all that stuff. But I definitely didn't consider myself like a quote unquote science communicator till probably like 2012 or 13. That wasn't a really conscious, purposeful part of my path forward. My role was to keep our coaching team updated. So I was absolutely an educator for, personal trainers where I worked. To my clients that I worked with in person as a personal trainer, and to my athletes that I worked with as a 3DMJ coach, and to my fellow coaches within 3DMJ. And I was happy to do questions and all that. Like I was watching the examples of Dr. Joe, Lane Norton, people who were just out there doing Q&As, answering questions, doing videos, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, I see the path before me. But what really kind of gave me the opportunity to move forward is that Matt was a conscious content creator. He was in the midst of the community, and he knew what questions they had. He knew what challenges people faced. He knew what they were interested in. He knew what they wanted. So he was able to platform me, much in the same way that you said, hey, this could be a value add. And I immediately had credibility because I was his coach. And I had, I would say I had developed an ability to speak from my experience teaching and training others. And I had, just completed my master's. So I was at a critical point where I actually had value to add. I had knowledge. I had experience working with many athletes and myself at the time. And boom, he was able to ask the right questions that really got people engaged and interested. And that was kind of where things really shifted and the trajectory became clear, and where I started to consider that, hey, maybe I can make a larger impact by producing content than I can, spending 30 hours a week working with people one-on-one.
Let me just say, Eric, that there's a lot to unpack there, as Eric would be the first to say. And I think a few things in my head. One, I think a lot of times when it comes to content, because all these platforms are exceptionally new, they're quite new. They're additive, really, a lot of the content creation, some of the things that people learn. You can't have a Christian Guzman without a Matt Ogus. You can't have a Jeff Nippard without a Matt Ogus, which is why Jeff gave respect to Matt recently, kind of in a post, an OG, as you said, the vlogging style, where it's like, hey, let me document kind of my personal struggles, triumphs, this journey itself. Let me impart a little bit of knowledge, and people learn from that over time. And it actually is interesting where you said, Eric, you need the pulse. You need to have the pulse of the people, not necessarily to be completely swayed by them. And that's something I want to talk about, balancing between what people think they want and what you want to provide, or what you think will have more value to them or be more useful, have a higher utility. But having that pulse to understand what people would want, how to create that content, continue to create it to be relevant, and then for him to know that, honestly, that's not hard to figure out. Eric knows a lot of information. Eric knows a lot of information that's directly relevant to my subscribers. Eric presents himself well. Let me if he didn't figure that out, that's just like a golden goose walking by, like, oh, that was awkward. They messed that one up. For you, you actually probably could have experienced the most explosive, insane growth of your Instagram, Eric, if you were lit on the gram circa 20, what would it be? When were the muscle strength pyramids released?
They were released late 2015.
Okay, so if you were actually on the gram and present with how, Matt was in there, He was doing a great job promoting it. No joke, that would have been a huge opportunity right there. And I think for yourself, can you just talk to me about getting onto some of these platforms? And I suffer a little bit from this, and so I can relate. Where you think to yourself, okay, wait, well, I'm a coach here. I want to provide information that's going to help people. Instagram, it's a photo, a few words. I actually have a 300-word limit. It's censoring us, Eric. It's limiting how much we could speak on a topic. Why would I waste my time being on Instagram when I could write another fantastic article that'd be, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 words and would more fully explain my position? So let's talk about kind of balancing content creation, mixing kind of the media, so to speak, and how you came to that conclusion, or you arrived where exactly you should be, where you use it, you leverage it. Eric, from 2 years ago to now, let me just say, as your unofficial social media manager, whew, on Instagram, the swipe ups, like this is actually one area I have no problem saying that you absolutely trounce Aaron Trexler on, where on Instagram, he is the king of the repost. Anyone says something, he'll just repost it and then have like a check mark or like a thumbs up. There's nothing that he adds to the conversation. He's just reposting it. Whereas you're trying to think like when you're prepping. I'll give you an example of Eric just evolving over time. You're a Pokemon. You're right now like Ivysaur. Eventually you'll get to that Venusaur, and then it's game over for everyone when you do that solar beam. Coupled with that stone skin, of course. That when you went through your recent prep in 2019, how you started opening up a little bit more, about the process. But it's like you managed to turn something that, at once is personal, on another standpoint, you're probably thinking to yourself, 300 words, is that enough to even convey what I think? But you're able to communicate with a lot of people that process. So how did the evolution of your content, how did that take place from basically being just that cool guest, always on that album, to having your own damn albums, to not only doing albums, but now you're doing movies, you're doing everything. So how did you go from basically that starring guest role to where you're at now?
Yeah, this has been something that has been intentional at times, face palmy at times.
Yeah.
A little bit of, wow, I did really well with that, pat myself on the back. And eventually what's emerged is a working system where I understand where each platform fits into how I do what I try to do to reach my mission, as, supporting the lifting community, which is essentially what I'm here for. I'm trying to provide people sustainability in their lifting careers. Exploring the meaning of lift, as we face palmingly say, dad joke style. So I think the first platforms I was on where I was actually trying to do this was YouTube. YouTube and blogs. Blogs have been around forever. They're not going anywhere. I think a lot of people think blogs are dead, but blogs are actually, they've been there. They're going to be there. They're not going, just like email, like things don't, if they've been around long enough, eventually they become staples. They may not necessarily be the primary place that people consume media. There's going to be a certain amount of people who just don't ever do blogs. They might like long form content, but they don't like reading. And they might just be a podcast and long form YouTube person, and that's all good. So anyway, I was doing the blog thing, still am. I still write articles. And I had to assess how I interrelate with each medium. So I would say circa, if we go to 2012, we were doing the YouTube thing, and it was becoming increasingly obvious to us that if we didn't step up our production game and our intentionality and our frequency and think more about titles, metrics, and just basically put a lot more effort into YouTube, that we were going to have extremely slow organic growth. And we thought about, okay, what would be required to do that with YouTube? And we realized it was something that would be draining on the team as a whole, would take time away from coaching, and would have money that we simply just didn't have. So YouTube has and probably has stayed something that looks like we don't put a lot of effort into it. Like if you go to the 3DMJ YouTube channel, 90% of the videos over the last couple of years are just us posting our podcast. Right. And as we know, that's YouTube podcast is it's like a side growth. Most of it's happening on Spotify, on iTunes, on other platforms, etc. So we kept doing the videos and it's out there, but that was definitely more like Q&As, semi-related topics and just informational content that people could consume. And man, if you look at the comments we've got on our YouTube channel for the last 10 years, it's been, I can't believe these guys don't have more followers. The quality is gold. And when they say quality, you best believe they do not mean the video production, the sound, the angles, or anything, the editing. They just mean the actual content. So that's just not how you grow on YouTube. I knew that, but we were producing semi-regular content on YouTube. I would normally drop a long-form series, like a 6-part series, every couple years. So the Muscle and Strength Pyramids was originally a 6-part nutrition series, average length about 20 minutes, that somehow, against all metrics, blew up relatively to the size of our channel because it got reshared so many times, and coaches started using it as like, hey, here's what you need to know, first-time client, or even here's how we educate new coaches on our team, etc. And then I did a number of others. I did AO, Anecdotes and Observations. I did Say What? Science and Application with Eric Helms. I did the Muscle and Strength Pyramids for training in 2015 as a video, and then eventually that culminated in Andrea saying, hey, we should make this into books, and then partnering with her and Andy in late 2015 to launch that. Like you said, any intelligent person who says, hey, I want to be a science communicator for bodybuilding, which is a visual medium, they would be really, really dumb to not have jumped on Instagram sometime when it first popped up in like circa 2012 to 2014. I jumped on Instagram in 2016 because I'm just that good at this whole thing. You know, this is an example of face-palmingly dumbness. And it took me going to Australia on a tour with Lauren Conlon, Paul Revelia, who've both been on, and Lane Norton, and we did a series of talks in Perth, in Sydney, and Melbourne. And at every single location, people were like, "Oh, so what's your gram?" And I'm like, "I don't have one." And the looks I got was like, "What? Like, why not? Like, why are you shooting yourself in the foot?" And it was around the same time that I really started thinking about social media differently. I think I was almost like looking at social media as like a victim of it, like all the things I hated about it. It distracted me. It reduced conversations to these faceless interactions where it was easy to devolve into arguments. People didn't listen to each other. They created bubbles. You were limited to 150 or 300 words depending on the platform, and you'd have to post a picture. And I saw all the examples of, people with their shirt off promoting something and selling fit tea, and just basically wanted to throw up my mouth whenever I thought about social media. Yeah. And then I realized, like, why are you in this one sector of your life acting holier than thou and looking at the inappropriate uses of it? Why don't you just get on there and use it right? Use it the way you want. Figure out how it works and what people respond to, but also start posting on it. So April 2016, I got on Instagram, and I at first just started on there. I was just joking around. I had a series called The Angle Game, which taught people the best way to out-angle your friends and look big in pictures, and to disrespect people who wanted to, take a picture with you for the first time because they appreciate you and you're actually using them to look bigger. Yeah. Which was a social critique of bodybuilding culture. It was subtle, but it was also funny, and it did well. But then I realized, I can actually do things on this platform that are serious. I can promote other things, and that began that. Sometime around 2013 or so, I want to say I did some of my first podcast, and I want to say shout out to Danny Lennon. I think I was back when he had double-digit number of episodes. Nice. Yes, there was a time that Sigma Nutrition Radio had that. I was one of his earlier guests, and it was really well received. I was also on a couple other podcasts at that time, and I realized just because I'm an external processor, I'm semi-extroverted in my speech and the way I think about things, like I figure them out as I talk, that I'm really good on the fly. And I'm pretty good conversationalist. So I felt I was pretty good at articulating myself because of my teaching experience. So I started doing any and all podcasts that I could as a guest. And I realized that there's short form content, there's mid form content, there's long form content, and you need all of it to communicate to people depending on their level of engagement, awareness of you, their care level, and what they like to consume content through, which medium. And then I had to think about, okay, I kind of have to do all of them, but I have to think about the effort levels that I have to put forth into each one, because ultimately some of the content I produce as a science communicator is going to require some really deep work, like peer-reviewed content, Like one of the things that I do is like 4 or 5 articles a year I publish peer-reviewed in scientific academic journals. That is a huge undertaking. These are 4,000 word, fully referenced things that once you think you're done, you get ripped apart in peer review, rejected, and then you have to resubmit and change everything. And it's a truly painful process, but it's very rewarding, but it takes up a lot of time and energy. And then slightly less painful, and mainly because there's less peer review and less requirements on you, is in-depth blogs, the type of thing I do for Mass, or when we have things that are 2,000 to 4,000 word blog articles that really go in on something. That takes a lot of deep work and energy for me as well. So that long form content I have to create space for in my life, both in terms of energy and time. So if, let's say I was not an extrovert, not an external processor, let's say it took a lot of effort for me to be articulate, or let's say I needed an Omar Isuf with me all the time to be able to get me to position me. I think you're really good as an interviewer, but I'm pretty good just like monologuing. Like I've had some pretty good YouTube series on that, just relative to the size of our small channel. So, and right now I've been monologuing for a very long time. You're probably going, shut up, I want to talk, and I'm not gonna. So because I have this ease of ability to do podcasts, it basically gives me the opportunity to produce long form content multiple times per week without putting forth any effort. And honestly, when I get off a podcast, I'm invigorated, I'm ready to go, it's low-hanging fruit, and I often start my day that way. Most of these that you're listening to are scheduled around 9 or 10 a.m. my time. So I have found that the shortest form content that I can do pretty regularly is I can post 5 to 7 days a week on Instagram. I do enough things that I can use it just as a, hey, this thing came out. Hey, I did this podcast. Or I will sometimes, and not sometimes, pretty frequently, make a post that is interesting and engaging. And I've gotten good at getting that across in the 300 characters. I do sometimes spend like an agonizing amount of time deleting words, changing ands to ampersands, and just making sure I can not miss any nuance or context in that format. But I also know which topics to tackle in a 300-word post. So I think as a content creator, you have to stay relevant, which means that you need regular short form content. And then you also need to produce work that keeps people engaged and learning. So you need some kind of mid to long form content that's also semi-regular. And then you need to make sure that those two things, kind of your stay in the public eye, don't take away your energy to create what's truly going to be, like you said, your magnum opus, which for me is going to be my peer-reviewed content, my long form stuff, or a book, or a video course like the Kaizen program, etc. Like those things take a lot of time, a lot of effort, sometimes travel, and you just simply cannot do that regularly without making the space and time and energy for it. And I think a lot of people get trapped on a platform because they become victimized by it. They're not good at daily posts on social media. They spend 3 hours trying to do it, responding to it, making errors, redoing it, or they do the podcast circuit, but they just get so burnt out. They jump on a podcast and they're done for the day. So I think people need to be very aware of what takes a lot of energy and what doesn't. I tell you what, like Greg Nuckols, he can write quickly, efficiently, put out good things. And I don't want to make it sound like he doesn't take effort for him, but he is much more built for his primary long form content being written than some other people. So I wouldn't try to be a Greg Nuckols. When we first partnered together on Mass, I was like, hey, it'd be really good for me to do videos in addition to written content and you to do written content. And he's like, yeah, I'm not that comfortable on videos. I'm not as articulate. I'm not as concise. I can say exactly what I want in a written form, and I can write, fast-ish for that medium. And I'm the kind of guy who most of the time when I do a video, if you see it on Mass, it's either my first or second take. And sometimes it's second takes because I forgot to turn on my mic. So I think that was a really long answer to knowing where you fit, what each medium serves for, and how to preserve energy so you can actually do the real big content.
I think it should be noted, too, that you can evolve to fit into more categories over time. And that's one of the things, seeing you is you have those skill sets where you could present sure in front of the camera, you're comfortable in front of the camera. That actually honestly, that can't be understated. And I think everyone would be lying to themselves right now, Eric, if they thought, you know what, I don't know if I want to play the social media game. It's like, you know what, you like lifting, you thought about it. You're not a world champion powerlifter, unless shout out to Russ Wool, someone's listening to it. So you don't have that kind of freak ability where that just puts you immediately on the map, or you don't have, a ginormous aesthetic physique. So you have to figure out some sort of way to differentiate yourself. But you'd be lying, I think, most individuals, if they didn't want to try and grow a platform and provide some sort of content, hopefully of value over time. And I think what you said, Eric, of knowing where you fit in or finding where you fit in is very important. Knowing what some of your strengths are, trying to develop other ones, and then finding the type of content that would best exemplify that. I think to myself often, and that's why, the kernel for this podcast came to me when you visited me in Toronto. We worked on that Kaizen project, where it's no insult to anyone whatsoever when I say this, but a lot of the science communicators who might have experience teaching, being professors and so forth, it's a different thing, man, when you throw a camera in front of someone. For a lot of people, it's kind of impersonal. It's looking at them right in the face. It's like this cyclopean eye, just this thing looking right back at you that's giving you no reciprocal feedback. So it's not like laughing at your jokes, or it's not making eye contact with you. It's not nodding in approval. So it's impersonal, and it's doing absolutely nothing. And a lot of people will tend to freeze. And I should expand that, not just science communicators. I will not say the social media figure, but I've been, Eric, at the inception. That's why it's Assassin of Kings on Instagram. But Jordan Syatt said it on that episode, so I could shout him out. Well, I've helped certain channels, just like, hey, like, here's some advice. They'll ask me what to do. And this has happened like 6 to 8 times. And I think there is a pattern. There's a reason why at the only talk I've given at Georgian College, shout out, in Ontario here, and I was invited again because apparently they didn't hate it, to talk about essentially authentically and organically, in quotation, so basically not using paid media to grow your content, some of the process behind it. I will go so far to say, Eric, and that's why I wanted to swing it around, that I have had individuals who would want to be on social media. So they want to be a known public figure, an athlete, it doesn't matter, right? Like they want to be in front of the camera. It's not like your first thought wasn't, hey, put me in front of the camera. Man, turn on those lights. You're going to see something. You turn on those lights, you're going to see a show. It had to be coaxed out of you, right? There was a person though, and this person now has over 2 million followers on YouTube, that in person, I shit you not, internally, and this is a little judgment on me, because guess what? You throw the camera on me, we're going to shine, we're going to just talk and roll off it. We're similar in that respect. It was one of the worst filming experiences, because the person kept flubbing it so badly. But this is a person, Eric, once again, and so that's why when I said you can evolve to fit the role, I just want to tell everyone out there, it is definitely possible. When we put the camera in front of you, 2018, amazing. Right off the bat, probably one take for pretty much everything. Much better than my average experience. This person who eventually has accumulated 2 million followers, and you honestly probably, if you notice cuts, Eric, on YouTube, that's an indication that there might be, some stumbling, maybe a word salad occurring, or maybe you lose your train of thought. But this person, where they, hey, I gotta do that again. I'm like, hey man, it's just a camera. Like, I told him this. I said, just act like it's your friend. Like when you start talking. So I think finding out what your skills are, and the part I wanted to emphasize in that talk, I thought it was great what you said, is also evolving to fit certain roles is entirely possible. Like, hey, maybe you're not excellent at writing at this point. Maybe when you talk, you could be a little verbose. Like you're invited on a podcast, and it's you discover it's a 2-hour conversation, and you talk for an hour and 50 minutes of it. Like there's these little things that you learn over time. But you can rise to the occasion, is what I think for a lot of people. Just one thing I wanted to say quickly, just before, because Eric, they're listening to you and they're like, well, okay, I don't have the PhD. I'm not great off the top of my head. I'm not an external processor. I'm not part of an elite coaching team. Okay, well, I should just pack up and leave now. I'm not Eric.
Yeah, well, I think that's another thing that I am very careful to, like, I agree with everything you said, and it's a really good point that it is an evolution. When I first did a test teach in 2011 I got hired by a colleague of mine with more teaching experience than I for a personal training college out in Sacramento, where I used to live. Shout out Bryan College, eventually Bryan University. I did a test teach to get hired, and I did really, really well, because I basically did it on concurrent training for hypertrophy and strength, something I was comfortable with, and I was talking to a room full of trainers who were already working at the university, college. And And it was on a topic that I had presented on before, super confident. And then my first day teaching, when I was observed, I had kind of like the OJT thing. I had to teach from the NASM manual as to a course to a group, learning that course and testing out at the end of their 2-year degree. And I totally did terrible. I just hid behind the podium, read line for line, flubbed my words, kept my eyes down, hoped there'd be no questions. And of course there weren't, because I was so damn boring. No one was even listening. And then the feedback I got, I could tell there was effort for it not to be all negative afterwards. And so I had to learn to teach. And that even someone who's an external processor, extroverted, all that stuff, there is a different skill set when you need to engage with new information and teach people who are not like you, and I think there's something to be said for staying in your lane, but just like you said, you can learn to drive in other lanes. You just have to develop that skill set. And I think there's a lot of pressure these days to be good now, to be everything now, to have value now, to grow a following now. And it is truly a false pressure. Things move quickly, but you can't try to match that speed when you're not capable and actually succeed. You'll just try to merge into traffic and crash, or you won't even be seen. So I do think that, like I said, by the time I got put on in 2012, it was A, a less crowded space, and B, I had been in the game, quote unquote, since 2004. That was 8 years of me trying to get my shit together. Going from being a lifter to being a personal trainer, to being a less bad personal trainer, to being a good personal trainer, to getting a bachelor's, to getting a master's, to teaching personal trainers, to competing in natural bodybuilding and powerlifting, to getting my pro card, to coaching people at the pro level and amateur level, and eventually, then going, oh, hey, I got some questions for you. It would have gone so badly in 2008 or 9 if I had those questions. The further back you'd gone in my career, the more badly that would have gone, and some things I even oh man, maybe I would have talked well but been wrong and got eaten up by the eventual evidence-based community that I was trying to serve, And I think it's really important to kind of know where you're at and respect that fact. But one of the things you talked about, so for someone who does get in front of the camera and kind of collapses immediately and just has a really tough time doing that, I think for me, what's made that easiest is knowing why I'm getting in front of the camera. I'm not doing it to grow my personal brand, Eric Helms, I'm doing it on behalf of a bunch of different partners I have. I think that's something that actually makes me a lot better, is that when I present myself on social media, I'm representing Omar Isuf, Jeff Alberts, Alberto Nunez, Andrew Valdez, Brad Loomis, Greg Knuckles, Eric Trexler, Mike Zerdos, AUT, Fit Genie, Gravis. There's so many people I partner with. I don't have any solo ventures. So I'm thinking of all the people who I'm partnered with, and I'm going, am I being a good representative of them? And I also feel like I have their strength. I'm not doing this for my own glory. There is a certain amount of, there's a difference between ego and confidence. I do get some ego satisfaction, and it feels good to know that I can get in front of the camera and shine. You mentioned that, and I see that in you. As much as you give me compliments, you crush it every time the camera turns on. And it's no different than when I talk to you in person. It's just you being you. And I think because you have a purpose beyond fulfilling your own ego, you're able to get in front of the camera and shine. And each time you do that, it builds your self-efficacy. You've gotten better over the last 10 years. You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for a mission and your principles. And you're trying to get better at it. And you have some level of separation that allows you to build confidence. Because if you don't have that separation, and it's this mixture of I'm producing content and also building my own ego, then when you don't do well, you can't reflect on it. You just feel like crap. Or you immediately bend to the will of the detractors, rather than being able to look at it as objective criticism and you modify it still according to your principles. You might just shift your principles. Then every time you get in front of the camera, it's a huge risk. It's scary. It doesn't have to be scary if it's not a reflection of your own personal value or your ego. You get the opportunity to improve and build self-efficacy, get better at it each time, and have true confidence. And I think you see this a lot of the times as well. When someone who is immediately rewarded, they do well, they get better, but once something goes bad, they disappear. Mm-hmm. It's like the fighter who never gets knocked out, and they catch it once and never fight the same again. And I think when you have your ego and your self-worth
and your purpose all tied up into how others validate and perceive you, rather than tied to a core principle that can be validated and perceived well, that's when you are potentially on a Titanic that could sink at any second. So I want to give you some credit. I want to talk to you about how you do your thing. You are really, really good at just showing up and being yourself on camera. But at the same time, I know you purposely create some separation between the Omar Isuf YouTube channel and the Omar Isuf Living Your Life. And I think that's impressive to me, because not just because like that's not like a crazy new concept, but the era you came up in, what you did was be quote unquote vulnerable. You videotaped your entire life. You vlog. You have the camera in the car with you. You have the camera with you in the bathroom, getting out of the shower, eating, and it's like it needed to be like kind of like the YouTube version of reality TV on the topic that you care about. And you didn't go that route, saw steady growth, and still maintained a level of authenticity, but not necessarily forced vulnerability or insight into parts of your life that do nothing except to kind of serve as some kind of, like creepy, ooh, I got the candid camera on this person. I shouldn't be seeing this, so I keep watching. So talk to me about that calculus for you, and how building confidence has come to you and so apparent, and how that meshed with what might be your natural skill set. Maybe it wasn't so natural, you just gotten really good at it. I don't know.
So Eric, I appreciate that, and don't worry, I am so not pulling a MacGuffin here and delaying things, but there is something I do want to say before we get into that, which is super interesting, and that is, I think, some of our guiding principles, and I'm going to get deep here for a second. This is the moment, folks. I looped Eric into this at 46 minutes in, just to say that I think sometimes your life experiences can have a profound impact in terms of how you obviously perceive the world, how you want to operate, what those core principles develop within you. And I can say that I think both of us have probably been in situations, let's say, where we were financially without, so to speak. So we knew what it was like to be financially disadvantaged. Eric, you made that reference about the block of cheese inside your house. Like, what's for dinner? It's the block of cheese, homie. It's like, shout out Eric Helms. We both had that traumatic experience seeing Event Horizon, but we were faced with certain situations that they're not wholly unique or anything. But let's say in a society where being economically disadvantaged is seen as being a huge negative, experiencing that and knowing that it's not the end of the world kind of emboldens you, right? There actually is a great quote quickly, I think it's by Kirk Douglas, where he essentially said that one of the best things that happened to him is that he was born with nothing, because he knew theoretically it's like, this is the bottom. Like, oh, I have nothing growing up. Like, this is the worst. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen to someone in modern society, supposedly, Eric? Financial ruin. I went from being rich and now I'm poor. I'm a pauper. And there's a difference between being destitute and, being poor or not having the financial means. And I think coming from that position, that's why I don't want to quite speak for you, but I just want to say this because we're not that we're dancing around the topic, but I think we both have experienced what it's like to be in quotations without, and I'm not trying to over glorify it or sensationalize what we went through. Like I said, I don't think it's wholly unique, but understanding that there's much more out there and that having a job, fulfillment should be a high priority. So it's not just for ourselves, like, hey man, let's make them dollar bills rain. Oh, we're going to be a personal trainer. Well, you know what we could do, Eric? We could hire trainers underneath us. We get a whole pyramid scheme going on. We could start increasing the cost. We could really get some slick marketing. Let's get someone that's really attractive just to be the billboard for us, right? Like all these considerations, I think fundamentally, where we are really aligned is we need to have some sort of personal fulfillment to know that what we're doing positively impacts others. Now, how that takes place, how it manifests itself, can change over time or evolve over time for us, right? We're like you, as you said, started writing articles more in depth, appearing on podcasts. So you start adding kind of levers to the system, so to speak. But that core principle was formed earlier on and it's solidified in what you do. And I'll just say very briefly, and I don't know if you had this experience, and that's why, again, careful not to speak for someone else. But being a trainer, what do we experience, Eric? I could say, at least for myself, that in general, the prices that we charge, we tend to charge people a little bit more. And so those that have the means are the ones able to afford personal training. And so it's typically some of the glorified careers. And there's nothing wrong with being a lawyer, a doctor, ER surgeon. I'm thinking of one man in particular, there was a brain surgeon, all these distinguished positions that I thought, obviously to myself, there's nothing wrong with them. But I thought, oh, these are like the end point for one's career. And one of the through threads, and it's not just those positions, but actors too, And I think part of it is when people obviously seek out a personal trainer, they might be a little unhappy. But hearing their stories where I thought this is the natural endpoint of one's career or journey. I want to be the surgeon. I want to be the professor. I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to be an actor. They were fundamentally unhappy people. And so it's not that their career didn't give them fulfillment, is that there's a much larger picture out there. And so when you conceptualize kind of your existence or how you want to move forward, the framework of how you want to operate, you need to think of all those components. And so I think at the very least, what I decided is that in the career that I choose or in what I do, I can't hate it, because if I hate it, then I won't be able to give it my 100%, and I won't be able to invest in it, because I think it's natural for us to want to invest in things that we enjoy or we derive fulfillment. I'm not saying you're writing an article, Eric, for a peer review. You're not thinking to yourself every single moment, oh my, I can't wait till people read this. This is going to turn the evidence-based community on its head. You're thinking, okay, this is a little laborious. It is strenuous. It requires some work, but this is doing something that aligns with the center of myself and what I want to do. So I think that gets crystallized over time through various experiences. And I think the ability to reflect or self-reflect is very important, to have that self-awareness and just realize you're kind of like, how do you say, in the Yellow Brick Road here, Wizard of Oz style, where you think this is the natural endpoint you want to go, and then you think to yourself, is this it really? And that was one of the brief, I'll just close out with that. That was one of the brief motivations for me, just to take a little bit of time. I was getting my degree just for myself, kind of explore what I wanted to pursue, and then I just stumbled into it, so to speak. Where like I got the job, got how do you say, a raise, got another position, and then it just kind of stumbled forward into that and didn't look back. But at the very least, I think one of our core principles, and again, I'm not trying to speak for you, is that we have to derive some sort of personal fulfillment to believe that what we're doing is positively contributing. And I could clarify what that means, because that's a little, nebulous, that definition, to the world. And so I think that informs everything else. And then it's like, how do I express that in content and all those things? And for everyone, that's a little bit different what it looks like, their core principles. I'm not trying to speak for anyone.
No, I think just to give you my personal flavor on that and confirm what you're saying, I actually feel very fortunate that this was a revelation I had before I even got into fitness. So out of high school, I joined the military, and that was the first time I felt, oh, I'm good in terms of a resource availability. You have healthcare, you have free food, you have a place to stay. You're in the barracks or dorms, depending on what service you're in. And every 1st and 15th, you get a paycheck, no matter what, And if you are not someone who spends frivolously or likes a lot of stuff, I never got past E4, which is the 4th rank as an enlisted person, a senior airman in the Air Force. It's not that much money, but it was consistent. No matter what, it's always there. All of my basic needs were met. And I really did not like my job. So I realized how I formed a very clear connection to wanting to never compromise in my life. And what I mean by that is not like compromising relationships with people, but compromising my values or my passion. That no matter what I was going to do, so long as I just needed to meet this really low bar of basic needs, so that I didn't worry about whether I could take care of things. I only need enough money so I don't have to worry about money. Was what I realized. And that was a very freeing experience, because like you said, I had been, and I remember worrying about debt and paying off bills when I was a single digit age, because I would, just seeing what like my mom was dealing with or something like that. And again, I'm not trying to glorify that or anything like that, but I do think that I became debt phobic from a very young age. I didn't get a credit card forever. It informed a lot of the ways I operated. I didn't want anything holding me down or something sitting on my shoulder, feeling like a gorilla that could take something away from me at the last minute. So just having a career in the Air Force the first couple of years, man, I'm good to go. I don't have to worry about it. If someone says, hey, do you want to go out to eat? Yes. Hey, if I want to go here, awesome. No matter what, I was always good. And I realized how little that took, but also how ultimately that wasn't fulfilling. It was just taking care of my basic needs, which at times in my life had been uncertain. So, yeah, I was unafraid of diving full into something that was a huge unknown. I remember essentially the turning point for me was turning down a government job after I got out of the Air Force, but doing something I would have hated, but highly secure, making more money than any 21-year-old had business making with no high school, with nothing more than a high school education in my background and what I got trained to do in the military, to going to working for minimum wage in a state with a low minimum wage, Georgia at the time in the mid 2000s, being fitness staff and eventually a personal trainer. And I saw the exact same thing. I had the place I trained at the longest was a place called Fitness Together, and it was in a higher income area of the Sacramento suburb. And it had clients who were paying high rates for 45-minute sessions, and most of my clients were doctors, and that I recall. I'm thinking, and these spouses of doctors, and it had no bearing on their happiness or fulfillment. If they were doing something they cared about, if they had something that they were passionate about, if they were religious or involved with their family, or they had some other calling, or if their job did happen to align with their passions, they were happy. And that just further reinforced that. And that is eventually why I stopped personal training, because it was like 80% alignment with what was making me passionate. But I really wanted to eventually do what I started doing. So anyway, I just want to confirm what you're saying 100%. There was no fear holding me back. And then through the processes of achieving some success and pushing myself and not failing, it just slowly kind of steamrolled into building self-efficacy. So I think that I see people going through that process in fitness, and I think to myself, like, man, what if I had started in fitness, it was viable, and then I had this kind of revelation? I could have been like we've talked about many times, like the Mike Chang or the Fit T seller or the whatever. You're worried about money too much, or there's a fear-motivated decision or an ego-motivated decision, and you take the quick road, and then you're actually in the field you're passionate, and you've poisoned the well.
Yeah.
That would suck, man. I would have to change my name or something, So, yeah.
Eric, just imagine if you came from a very robust financial background, and apparently one of your goals was to enhance the fitness community, but all you did was poison the well and sell, shitty things over. I wonder what that would, I wonder if an individual like that would have a profound existential crisis gnawing at their soul that would basically produce seemingly an inability to sleep at night, chronic insomnia. It seems, of course, those things clearly must be unrelated. The chronic insomnia and then the lack of personal fulfillment, direction, ethics, or morals that one has established in business. I just wonder what that would be like, Eric, if one was in that situation. So just coming up with a very theoretical scenario there.
Yeah, I can't speak to that, but the good news is that someone in that scenario would actually have a soul, so that's good. There's always redemption,
Theoretically, right. And
Theoretically.
Right.
Yeah. So Eric,
there would be no reason to have a problem with sleeping if you had no issues with what you were doing,
Right.
hypothetically.
Right, hypothetically. And so, I will just say that I will now answer Eric's question. I'll dive in, but I want it because I think, not that we're dancing around the topic at all, but I think there's a reason why sometimes you see a pattern or a similarity with an individual, or it's easy. Like for me, the thought of doing a podcast with you, multiple reasons. So values is kind of the cornerstone of things, where it's like, does this person lying? Like basically, do I have to fear we're going to be on an episode and Eric's going to say some outlandish shit? Like just out of the blue, he's going to call something and I'm like, oh man, and we're doing it live and now we got to do damage. All those little things where it's like, well, I wasn't comfortable with the way you said this or 1, 2, 3 or that position or how you treated that individual, which on top of, sure, it's like, yeah, you're great in front of the camera. It's like that makes it an obvious choice. So I think for people out there, just understanding that, and I think because these are uncertain times, I kind of just wanted to say that for anyone listening, because I know there are quite a few people, even if you were in or are in the social media space, they might be facing a lot of uncertainty right now. So not just their physicality, their physique, their training, but I'm talking economic uncertainty and all those things. And so one of the things that we may have experienced both, Eric, and that's how I'll launch into answering your original question, how to get started and then like talking in front of the camera and like the content, all those things, would be that when I started, there was no validation to be had, really. You're basically just talking in a space. And what I mean when I say that is these days, we talked about the learning curve, and that's why I always conceptualize it to me when it comes to music, because music, depending on the instrument, your talent, and a bunch of other things, there is a certain learning curve that might take a while, and a lot of people will fall off. Training, you go ahead, you lift for 4 weeks. You never lifted before. Every single week, you're lifting more weight. It kind of has that immediate gratification, so it hooks you in. But other skills for individuals, and that's why I bring up music, it's a lot longer. You think to yourself, okay, I've been practicing 3 months. Am I actually better, or am I worse? Like, it's hard to say. It's hard to quantify because over the time course, it's such a longer time course, and you really have to stick with it. And there's a certain point where once you're an intermediate, that time course gets longer and longer. Cool. It kind of was like that when it came to YouTube. And that's why, from having other experiences in my life, it was no problem to, one, speak in front of the camera, because I was always comfortable with public speaking and all those sorts of things. And actually what suggested, I got to give a shout out to Sean Smith, was the man's name, one of my clients. And so shout out to Big Man CEO, who he first hit me to the concept of trading dollars for hours, where he said, Omar, like, this is great, like I think you're a great trainer, but it's like you could only trade these hours so much. Like, if you worked, and I was working 12-hour days, you're making a X amount of money. What are you going to do? Just keep increasing it. So you have to think, what are some of your skills? He said you're very personable, like all those things, the charisma. And then just emerging at that time, Eric, YouTube, it was cat dancing videos. Okay, cat dancing videos were the thing. And so
I missed that trend, by the way.
Yeah, we could bring it back. Okay, we
could
could
have been an early adopter, but
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah, it's so you eventually got on the train, but boy, did you miss a lot of them along the way. You know what I'm saying? It's like you were supposed to make the 4:15, and now it's midnight. It's midnight, and you barely squeaked by, but it's okay.
Grab that last cat by the tail.
yeah. What a video. And so I was fortunate, and I think you're similar in this, that when we started, you couldn't experience the meteoric rise, because if you have the meteoric rise, that fall will sting so much more. And what I mean when I say that is that I had a career, or I had jobs. I was working while making YouTube content, while doing it full time. I know what that's like. What's the worst possible situation? That, in quotations, all social media no longer becomes financially viable for me. So you have to, in quotations, get a real job. I don't care. So it's not a fear-based decision-making that enters my mindset, where it's like, well, I got to sell this product now, because you know what the bottom line here is, and if I don't do that, like, I'm going back to bartending. I'm like, it ain't that bad. It's fine. So there's not that fear associated with it. And then also there was a slow learning curve of putting out content, and some people liking it, and slowly growing over time. And that gradual process made it so that you weren't attached to the ideas like, oh, you know what, man, Eric, hey, boy, TikTok, you could dance. We're going to do some TikTok videos, and we're going to explode. We're going to go viral. I think anytime you intend to go viral, and I actually want to dissect something, because I think one of the skills I have is breaking down not some of the steps of social media, but some of basically the hidden calculus behind the curtain that occurs for certain things. So when you release, for instance, the 20-minute nutrition videos, immediately why they were shared, Eric, I saw those ones, is clear, concise. So sure, they're 20 minutes, but they're jam-packed full of information, very well presented. It was, I say novelty as a positive, meaning that before it had not previously been done before. And so it was something that immediately individuals can reference. So no longer when people said, hey, like, how do I count macros? Or what's the function of this? Or what's the hierarchy of importance? All these very important questions, they could just reference, hey, this video right here. And so it naturally becomes shareable. And you weren't thinking to yourself, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, I'm not speaking for you. You didn't think to yourself, bro, I'm gonna make this 6-part series, and once again, VIRAL, it's time to go viral, baby. Am I wrong, or am I right?
No, I was way more pragmatic. I was like, I am so tired of having to type the same shit. I'm gonna make videos, and I can just, hey, here's the YouTube link. It was pragmatic, but it was informed by a problem. So I was creating a solution to a problem that apparently wasn't just my problem, but every communicator, trainer, dude who lifts, whose brother gets into lifting and he doesn't want to explain to him all this stuff kind of issue.
And I think, Eric, just having some human empathy could greatly assist in all this, where you stop thinking about, hey, what do I want to start like, hey, what's awesome for me? You know what, Eric, I'm awesome. I got a great physique. Let me just talk about myself and like film videos, and of course people are going to love it. And unfortunately, like, this sounds like a caricature, but I guarantee if we could publicly and out loud hear what some individuals think, that's kind of what's going on internally. And I think if you frame it instead, we speak about value. So what do we mean when we say that? Well, I'll give you an example. Some of the idea of having some empathy is like, well, what can help someone else out? people tend to have, when I've been training people, I notice they have problems squatting. Here's one of the most common problems. If I make this, probably it's going to help individuals out. When I seem to teach this in person, and that's where a lot of the stuff, and I'm sure you're the same way, it was instructive from before. These are things that assisted individuals when we would be training them in person. You come up with a little bit of a system, a framework to help people out. Okay, so we're talking about squatting. How does one teach a squat? Okay, so I kind of have 5 or 6 or whatever essential steps. Okay, nutrition. What are some of the most common questions? I'm hungry at night. Well, what you're really asking is you want to lose weight and you find that you get hungry late at night. So how do we want to take care of hunger? All those things. So you kind of keep removing some of those assumptions. You start questioning it and you start thinking to yourself, how can I better answer this person's question? And I think that's basically content creation in a nutshell. Because sure, and to me, that's one of the things we do here at Iron Culture. And the cult, I must give respect to the cult. They pay attention, and I read the comments of people loving that banter or a little bit of that flavor, the improvisation. Is, hey, if you want to just distill that information and learn exactly what you need to learn, you can read the articles from Mass. If you just want the I don't mean it when I say robotic as a negative, but if you want just the facts, no personality, because this is, guess what, we're delivering science now. It should be devoid of those things where I want to communicate these things essentially as they should be, so there could be no misinterpretation, right? That is the place that you would seek if you want it immediately distilled. With a podcast, it's conversational, it's improvisational, right? It's dynamic, it's fluid. The conversation that's happening, it's evolving. We're playing off of one another. So there's all these things that are occurring at once. We kind of have a winding, twisting narrative that we know that we're probably going to reach like a rough framework that we both have established. But then it's fun because it's a live thing that we're both participating and creating together. And so I think when it comes to overall content creation, the framework of how do you help someone out in the first place, like how do I best answer this question? How can I do a better job? And that's why, jokingly, Eric, the way I personally conceptualize my YouTube channel, and it actually is ripe now for me to think about it again and think about what direction I want to go into. I kind of thought about it, to be honest, kind of like your grade 9 to 11 chemistry teacher, where it's like, these are the topics we're going to be teaching, right? You tune in. You go 9 through 11, and then you evolve your ass out of there. Where this is just a statistic, obviously, on YouTube, that the average person will watch you for several years, and then they move on for whatever reason. It doesn't matter if it's fitness. Like, let's say they stop their fitness journey. Let's say that they go past that point. There were so many individuals, and that's why I was giving Russ some shit. I was joking with him when he was on. But I damn well, that man right there, he was leaving comments on the YouTube channel. It's like, you watch it, then guess what? You become more of an athlete. You become a world champion. Are you going to be watching videos on how to squat again? No, right? So you kind of, I think, knowing where you should be or who your audience is very important. And that's why I sometimes joke, and like I'll joke that I made like 50 how to squat videos. Well, guess what? The YouTube internal system of sorting is shit. Right? It's not like a TV series, so it's not sequential, right? It actually doesn't make sense. And you can create playlists, but they have shown that, once again, the people, if they're taking a look at things, 20% might know how to navigate YouTube effectively. Oh, playlist. Like, let me check it out. Tutorials. Okay, what's going on? And that has evolved. And I think there are certain individuals, and I'll give Jeff Nippard credit, where it's like, his skill set, it's like, hey, Eric, dynamic in front of the camera. I put Eric in front of the camera, he's going to shine, okay? If that's not one of your skill sets, what Jeff did a fantastic job of doing is like, hey, what can I do? I can take information that's already out there. Is he presenting anything new? No. But is he presenting it in a new way? I'd argue yes. And what I mean when I say that, with the graphics, with the slick editing, all the things that come together to create an experience for an individual. Right. Is they're able then to digest it a little bit better. So those things are important. But the way that I thought about it in my head, it's kind of, it's funny, similar to you, where it's like, where does each content piece fit? So Instagram, as you know, that's an opportunity for myself, because guess what? It's a photo. Just to cut loose a little bit more, playfulness is an integral part of everything that I do, because it is that whole concept. I think in the right zone, it's where you can get the most creative, right? You can express yourself unrestrained, where you feel like they consider it like, oh, is this the best way to go about saying this? Oh, you know what? If I want to do this instead, like if I want to be taken seriously, I really should pitch down my voice like this, because if I want to be an authority figure, well, wait a second here. Let me slow down the cadence of my rhythm right here of what I'm talking about, the diction of what I'm trying to say. Like all these little considerations where essentially you become an individual that is devoid of your own personality. And I see this all the time where, Eric, you see someone start a YouTube channel and how they talk in front of the camera is different than how they talk in person. I'm like, dog, are you serious? Like who is you? Like, who is this in front of the... You've created this... It's fine to create a persona, but if that persona is night and day compared to who you are, whew! So I think to kind of neatly tie together the question about creating content or all those things and the journey that I've been on is that it's natural once you have those first core principles about you, what you want to do, then you start figuring out how to achieve it. And I think YouTube was the natural place where, as you said, guess what, Eric? Lifting is a visual medium. So that's what we're going to do. And I think there's something to be said about doubling down on what you're passionate about. And what I mean when I say that is when I started making content about, let's just say, strength training in quotation. So things outside of just getting maximally swole is something I liked because I having a bit of an athletic background, working out with people that were a little bit more athletic. They weren't just solely focused on aesthetics. So I wanted to talk about that. And when I first featured actually my buddy Jeremy Hamilton, who broke the record, and I had in 2014 the series with him, man, it got the least amount of views out of any of the videos I was putting out. But I wasn't like, oh, like the feedback. Oh, guess what? Like, no one's liking this. Better stop. Like, no, I think this is useful. And then the powerlifting wave basically took off. And guess what? Along the way, those videos backlog, they start getting more views. So I think it's a careful balance between helping individuals out from both what you think they want to hear and what you think they should hear, and in ways that they could hear it best, so to speak. So that's why we have YouTube, Instagram. We joke around a little bit. We get a little silly, show some of that personality, occasionally drop a little bit of knowledge there. And then the podcast, why it was the natural extension, is that you have short form content, Eric, Instagram. We never made the Snapchat jump. I'm proud to say that. I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, like even Instagram, I had that kind of moment, Eric, where I thought like, okay, photo, got it. 300 words or less, got it. So there's some inherent limitations to this media. Why would I just not make a YouTube video? So short form content with Instagram, medium form content, let's say with YouTube, that's occasionally more longer form content, and then a podcast. And in that way, from what I'm able to produce, depending upon your level, there's some people that will only listen to the podcast that won't, when I say pay attention to Instagram, they might not check it out, or that's not where they derive their information. Other individuals, it might be more YouTube or even Instagram. There are people, I genuinely feel, Eric, there are probably individuals, even with you, it's like this academic where it's like, my primary source of information I digest from Eric is Instagram, not mass, not like the muscle strength pyramids, not the 3,000 podcasts you're on. Eric, I follow on Instagram.
Yep, it's a thing. Absolutely. I think you had some really, really good stuff in there. One of the things I want to highlight, because I think it's where we both think the same way, is that when I see a question come up consistently, I think, why does this person have this question? Why don't they know the answer? Not what's the answer? And I try to get to the heart of it. And when I make content to answer that question, if there's been an inflection point where I see this is something that keeps coming up, people keep not getting this, I try to answer the question with a form of content that answers it forever. Like that is my goal. When I make that video, when I write that article, it is everything we can possibly know to the best of my ability to find out and express it, and it should be done. Like, I should never get this question again, is my intention. Completely unrealistic, not the way it works, not what happens, but that is my process, so that I go into it with trying to get to the heart of the issue. Because like you said, a lot of the times the questions people have aren't actually the right questions, which is why they have the question in the first place. They don't get it. Like, why am I hungry at night? Oh, they're actually saying, how do I effectively lose weight? And I'm struggling, and the barrier is eating at night, but I have all these other things I don't understand. So if I was to make an article on meal frequency, if I was to write a chapter of that in my book, I did, then it's going to be completely comprehensive. The thing about like pure science writing is that it makes no assumptions. It simply attacks the topic directly. It goes on no quote unquote tangents. Like, how often when you are frustrated about something, you have a specific problem, question that you have that no one else has addressed, and you Google it, and you might find like the Wikipedia or textbook style answer, and it answers something close, but you just have this one little modification. You're like, I wish someone else could just say that. That's what I try not to have, because that's basically the way science operates. You might write an article about training frequency, and 98% of that article will just be about the narrow aspect of training frequency and the findings of the article, because science has to be precise. You can't make assumptions about the reader. You're not attempting to solve a specific problem. You're uncovering the outcome and the probability around it. It's getting it nailed down to the causation, the relation between two variables, and it serves a different purpose. To actually take a couple hundred scientific articles and make the connections between them, and then come up with a coherent, logically consistent system based on that is a whole other thing. So a lot of what I do, you could call it, like you said, curating scientific content and creating systems based on it that I update. And that takes a lot of work, but the motivation and the guiding kind of underlying thought process is that I'm trying to make it so that this is done. You don't need to ask this anymore. Now I know that that's not the way it works. I know we'll learn more, new problems will come up, and that creating a system will have its own inherent limitations and flaws that can be improved upon. But that's the way my brain goes through it, and it helps me create more useful answers and more useful content that are comprehensive and tend to, I'm not going to say go viral, but they tend to become, when I actually put forth the effort and time to create something that is like that kind of deep content, it tends to be pretty ubiquitously shared in the small circle that I produce content for. And that's very different than say, oh, we had an episode of the 3DMJ podcast that was a Q&A episode. Like, we helped the 30 people who listened and maybe the 300 people that had a similar enough question that directly helped them, rather than providing something that wholly goes into that. And I think one of the things that I struggle with is that someone new starts lifting every day, and the 2012 videos that I recorded on a Samsung S3 in a dark room of me drawing on a whiteboard, they aren't timeless. There's no way for them to be. And certain forms of content are inherently not going to be timeless. So, like, for example, on your YouTube channel, you're going to have to do a protein video every couple of years. There's no way around it. And that's something that I have come to accept, but it's definitely something I struggle with, because I think a lot of content creators have an element of creativity, and they have to, yes, like my goal is to serve the mission of helping people, but I'm also getting at some of my creative yayas, and for me to go back to like an earlier era of my artistic expression, it's like, damn it, So I think finding a way to manage that is also important, and that's why there's always going to be a third, fourth, fifth, sixth edition of my books. That's why Mass covers these things as they come out. That's why you asked me, hey, can we do a video on this, even though we've already done that video. It's not the exact same video. It's an update. It takes a different angle. But because, like you said, people are going to graduate from grade 11, and then someone else is going to start in the high school of lifting of Omar Yusuf, and they're going to need to know about protein.
Oh, yeah. And I think knowing, one of the things I've tried to be careful of is overstating kind of the knowledge in a particular area, because I do think knowledge is domain specific. And that is why the next topic I want to talk about, Eric, is curating individuals, because I think actually on Iron Culture, we do a damn good job. And that is thanks in no small part to Eric, who knows your favorite expert's expert. And I think once you establish a platform, it's important, and there's been conversations recently about amplifying voices. And I think when you have a platform, it is one of the potential huge benefits anyone can do. Was like, you know what? Like Eric has 120,000 followers on Instagram. Let's just say he found a fantastic article. He's going to share it because he thinks, one, it's of high utility for those that are reading it, but also that person right there, there's a certain process to growing your cloud or growing your following. That's like, if I could shorten this window because this person's producing better content than the audience, than this finite audience it's currently receiving it, let me boost it up a little bit. Or this is the topic, or it could be another one. Let's say someone doesn't want to grow their social media, but they just have a lot of knowledge. It's like, I think my subscribers or my listeners can immensely benefit from having this person on. And I think removing that ego sometimes for content creators, where there is kind of that I consciousness where it's like, it's about me. It's like we put on the video, turn on the video, and we're going to talk about myself. And that's why I could say personally, some of the fulfillment I've derived from Iron Culture is, for me, it's like anything that I try and do, I'm just curious and I want to learn more. And so the ability to be sitting here with you at the forefront of some of these conversations, and the ability then to also take a back seat and just listen, is invaluable, because I actually really enjoy doing that, as opposed to like, all right, guys, like content's on, like, guess what? We're going to talk about, A, B, C, D, and you make a video and it's okay, but you know what? There's someone else that knows a lot more about it. Like, hey, Eric, there's Boris Shaker right there. Yeah, why don't I interview the powerlifting legend, one of the greatest powerlifting coaches of all time, bar none? It's like you think they're gonna enjoy it. No, the TikTok crew's not gonna enjoy it, so we shouldn't have him on. It's like at some point you do have to have that calculation where there's that balance between what they expect of Eric and then what Eric will deliver. So can you just talk to me about the process for those listening about iron culture? Because what they think, kind of like that, hey, how do I stop being hungry at night? They probably think, oh, they seem to have a lot of really good guests. Like it just happens. Like they just have these great episodes that come out of the blue. But no, there's a process. Talk to me about curating first, specifically about the culture.
Yeah, man, that's such a. I love the way you softball this up to me because I'm not good at baseball, so I need these easy pitches.
Right.
So thank you. But no, honestly, you made some really, really good points, and they're things that I have done poorly in the past when I let ego guide me. Because the earlier era of even evidence-based professionals was to have all the answers, and was to be an authority and was to say I've never been wrong. I'm the smartest guy in the room and I have the citations to back it up or whatever. And when that gets rewarded, it becomes this cycle because you start to teach people that you're the all-encompassing authority. And like a great example, you see it all the time. Someone will be like, "Hey, Eric, I've got a slap tear in my shoulder. What do you think about this exercise?" I am tempted to try to give them some answer, but I'm like, no, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm not an actual doctor. I'm a fake doctor. I'm a PhD, so I think knowing where I'm an expert and then knowing your ability to identify other true experts in other fields and platforming them and bringing them on is important, and something that to give people a look behind the curtain of iron culture. We talk a lot about how we need to give people what they want, but also what they need. Because we want you to tune in, and we know that I don't want to sound disrespectful to anyone in the audience or anyone who's listening, but the people, it's more of an awareness thing, not an ability to gauge. So you are probably not aware of the real experts on some of the topics out there. And because I am just, I don't know, a networky type of guy, I've met a lot of the people, and because I reach out. So for example, if you hear me speak about intuitive eating, it's always in relation to bodybuilding, where there may be crossovers, how it is actually wholly different, and how, weight neutral approaches may or may not be relevant in the context of lifting and strength and physique sport. If I'm going to speak about, pain or injury, it'll be in relation to that, but you'll never see me like, I'm on a round table about intuitive eating, or I'm on a round table about pain science. I might host a round table on pain science or intuitive eating because they are tangentially related. You need to know about it, but just because people might think I'm an expert on it and it would feel good to speak from a place of authority about it, doesn't mean it's the best information. And because I don't know everything about it, it's more likely that I could make an error and give you false information. I think that's a tough thing to navigate, because as you get your head blown up from success, from doing a good job, from finding which platform you do the best on and putting effort forth and using your passion to leverage it and being successful and seeing your career expand, it's easy to buy into your own hype. And you can find yourself, and I have at times, speaking from a place of authority about something I am simply not an authority on, and going, shit, that I wasn't the best person to deliver that message, but I build a platform, so it's time for me to host someone else. And that's really what a huge part of iron culture is us trying to give exposure to people who you need to be listening from. You've never heard of them, so they're not going to be the person you're going to click on because they're not in kind of the cultural zeitgeist of who's a voice right now. But that's what we're trying to change, and that's not a knock on anyone. It's just like you can't be exposed to some random researcher at a university you never heard of in a country you're not from, who doesn't have a social media account if you don't know them, So anyway, I think it's an easy mistake to make, but it's one that's really critical to stay away from. And it's a good thing to remind yourself that, okay, if I'm not doing this primarily for my ego, but it does build it, then I have to keep a close watch on my ego to make sure that I am doing the thing that will help people the most, that actually fulfills my mission. So for me, I really have to think okay, what am I actually an expert on? I even, when people say, oh, Eric, he's an exercise science guy, or Eric, he's a nutrition guy, depending on what they come across, I go, to be honest, I'm a bodybuilding and strength researcher. So yes, that has a lot of crossover in the areas of nutrition and training, but I've never done a VO2 max test. Never, right? I am not an RD. I am not a therapist. And I think because lifters look at me talk about exercise science and nutrition, they only care about the stuff that relates to lifting. So they think I know everything about those topics, but I'm actually quite the specialist. So anyway, I think it's really important to be aware of who is the person who can really speak on this topic. How can you elevate them? And also, unfortunately, you also have to think about not only who knows the most, but who can also effectively communicate it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we've had some people on the podcast, like a great example. Mike Zerdos does not have Instagram, but Mike Zerdos is one of the best communicators out there. I learned a lot of my presentation techniques from him. If you want to know, who's at the forefront of modern periodization, Mike Zerdos is a great example. And I can think of numerous people who we've had on the platform of Iron Culture who are very articulate, very precise, will give you the correct answer, understand the nuance, and are good communicators, but you probably would have trouble finding any kind of large social media platform they have. But I think that's an important step. It's not just about, as you say, Omar, the difference between clout and credibility. You can use your clout to elevate people with credibility, to elevate the whole community. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
And I think we just gave the peak right there, Eric, because to be honest, and some people might not realize it, but YouTube gives you these lovely metrics, and you can also see external metrics of video views. And did you know this is, it's interesting how the social dynamics work. But it seems like for podcasts in general, the ones that have the most views that Eric has been on outside of, let's say, Iron Culture here, what do they all share in common besides a hunky physique? A lot of them are debates, or debates in the title, or verses, right? And so there is, and I think I just want to explain this a little bit for the listener. There is a financial and social impetus to do some of these things. I'm not saying to sensationalize, but to be maybe needlessly combative. So instead of having a conversation for me, Eric, is, hey, I'm going to talk, you're going to talk. We're going to see if we can reach some sort of synthesis of our ideas, at the very least, mutual respect, and we could come at some sort of understanding. Whether that'll be a full understanding remains to be seen. But a conversation means we have the intent from both ends. A debate, on the other hand, is there must be a victor. It's a zero-sum game. And if you will tend to look on what performs the best, let's call it the call-out kind of culture. So this is now going beyond fitness, but it's social media, because humans are curious individuals. And when there's a crash, when we see a crash take place, we all kind of divert our gaze, and we see that immediately. Some of the more sensational, gossipy things, it kind of has that the reptilian aspect of ourselves where we're kind of curious and we want to see it. So it's no surprise then when it comes to podcasts, and that's why we joked before about, and I was told, by the way, Eric, that it's not, we're both Joe Rogan ites, let's say, and someone said it's actually Joe Rogies, and I was going to say just simply Joe. I was going to call him Joe Rogaine, but it's clearly not working. So that's, I don't want to make that insult. But what I can say is that part of the reason, sure, people might credit his interviewing ability, how he makes guests comfortable, but really what put him on the map, and I know Aus, shout out to Aus, has been watching him for like 9 years, would be a little bit more controversial figures being given a platform and that being shared. And then people retroactively go back. So what I'm trying to say to the listener, I'm not trying to somehow justify our approach, because actually it's been pretty amazing the type of audience we've been able to grow without making any compromises, Like, except the one time we had Greg Knuckles on, but Eric, I understand that we have to make tiny compromises of some sort. We understand Skynet's taken over. We have to have the rogue AI. We don't want to be enslaved like the Matrix,
I'm not trying to have the HKs hunting me in the field of bones. I want to have our little Terminator protected building where we get the podcast, and pretty much just for appeasing the copied versions of Knuckles that resides in all the robots that have taken over the planet. So yeah, I'm just trying to secure my place in the future.
Hey man, Eric, I'm with you, bro.
So all that compromise is so we avoid the ultimate compromise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, losing our lives. So I think it's important to note that, because there is that pressure. And when I say financial pressure, so let me just phrase it this way: the more views you get, if you sell any product, it doesn't matter, house cleaning, fitness products, getting hunky, okay, sexual health, which is where we're going to pivot, the more eyeballs you have on your channel, on your Instagram, the more things you'll sell. Simply put, as long as basically people aren't following you ironically, so you're so terrible that people decide to follow you because it's kind of funny to you, you know what I mean, Eric? But all other things being equal, right. The larger you're following, the more money you'll derive from it. And so there is that pressure then to do some of those things. And I think the first principles approach, when we started our own culture, it was a passion-driven project where it's like, we weren't like, hey, Eric, we're going to sell this for $100 million 3 years from now. It's like, you know what? I like you a bunch. I want to spend more time talking with you. Let me use a big excuse. Let me create a podcast. Let's just do a podcast together, and then we could go from there. And so I think when you start from that, to give credit to all the listeners, we're very thankful for them because we've been able to navigate some of these potentially perilous parts of creating content and not have to compromise. And so it really is the astute listener that is able to raise our platform up like this. And so we have them to thank. And really at the end of the day, like any good Eric, music, movies, literature over time, it's word of mouth is the big thing. Is the big thing that still works. And so sure, you share it on your social media. I'll sometimes host a video on YouTube, but it's one person saying to another person, oh, you need to check out this episode right here. And so, man, all I got to say, that's what's up.
No, I totally agree, man. It's the version of word of mouth in our social media age, which is it's crazy to see how it's changing. Now we're seeing how global changes in society and culture impact the expectations of people who have a platform, which is really, it's probably not new. It's just that fitness is a bit of a bubble because it's asocietal, not even apolitical. It's something that should cross across the needs of people from all kinds of backgrounds, countries, and nations. And so I think for something to penetrate into our sphere, it's been a really kind of crazy thing to sometimes feel pressure in certain situations, like, oh, I need to speak on this. I'm not just Eric anymore. Crap. Me trying to get a lot of people to follow me on these social media platforms so I can share with them, lifting science has evolved into something that I couldn't have predicted. So I think it's this conversation has been really cool, and it's also one that I know is going to evolve and change as more of our social interactions occur on social media, and more of the social pressures occur on social media, and more of sociology is played out on social media, which is unsurprising, but it is interesting.
Eric, what can I say? I'm just waiting. So I have a confession, Eric.
Confess.
So I joked about TikTok, and I was like, "Oh, the TikTok fam." But that's you know when you see something taking off and you wish you were part of it. I'm gonna be honest. I look at you, and you know what I see?
The next TikTok star.
A TikTok star. You could dance, okay? Here's the thing, Eric. It's 5 to 15 seconds. Let me just pitch you right here, okay? As your unofficial social media manager. Okay. So it's mainly people that are less than 18 years old. So highly impressionable. The next generation. 5 to 15 seconds. They'll do some shitty dance that they learned from somewhere with no rhythm or coordination, but they'll grow a big following. What do you do with that following? Well, there's no real way to monetize it or divert it to another platform at this current point in time. But it's going to happen, Eric. Don't worry. So if you start doing sexy dances, make it 18 and over, because let's be honest, that moves are hot, okay? And then you just have a little like swipe up to the latest mass article. I'm thinking this is the next level for you.
You had me at I have a confession.
Thank you. No.
I'm in. Let no further be said. I think the connections are obvious.
Yeah.
The conversion rate should be the highest.
Undeniable.
And it would be. I actually think we should consider editing this out. I know we'll forget, because that's just the type of guys we are.
Right.
And if it isn't edited out, this is a joke.
Right.
And if it is edited out, you won't hear this. But let's just say, let's finish this episode so we can get working on this, because if we don't do it, someone else will.
Right. And Eric, I don't want to be that late adopter. I don't want to wait till for our lives to be over. To quote that great song that kind of just encapsulates what we're all about at the end of the day. So Eric Helms, E Helms, TikTok legend. Like when they write your Wikipedia page, you're thinking to yourself, man, my contributions to exercise science research review, it's going to be there. It's just like TikTok superstar is what it leads with. You're like, ooh, ooh.
Yeah, that's the future, and I'm actually hoping that it eventually overshadows everything else I've done.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, unfortunately, I think Groucho Marx passed away the same day as Elvis Presley. And there was supposed to be like a retrospective. It's like nobody cares about the man because he died as an unfortunate day to die. So I'm just saying that in one way you might think, oh, my life's work up until this point in time, it's going to be overshadowed by this frivolous app that no one's going to use in 3 years. Or you could think 3 words: TikTok legend.
Like I said, say no.
Well, Eric, can I just say thank you for being on this episode, and where can people find you?
Well, let me just say you're welcome, and thank you for being on this episode. I can be found on Iron Culture. Where can people find you?
Typically Pornhub. The videos are yet to be released. Yeah, there's a contract dispute. It's honestly, I didn't know what happened behind the scenes. My impression was vastly different than what I've experienced. But you could primarily find me for now on Iron Culture. I'll just say that. Yeah, on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and they could use. Hey, Eric, if they want to help us out, so they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, we made it all the way to the end here. What can we do? You go ahead. We're reading, and I will read in one of the next episodes some of the positive and the rare negative ones, the reviews on iTunes, because they fill our heart. And if you're on the YouTube comment section, you can go ahead and try and leave a comment. We'll do our best to respond. And anything else you want to say, Eric?
No, I just want to say I appreciate the cult.
Yeah.
To all the pivots we're going to make from TikTok, away from Pornhub, apparently, with that contract dispute, to sexual health, which is probably, I don't know. Some of the things that you told me about Pornhub make me think they're not quite in the realm of sexual health.
Yeah.
Maybe the opposite. So follow us with our pivots on TikTok for sexual health, on YouTube, leave comments, and just want to thank you for being part of the cult.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for being you. And guess what? We're here every single Monday. It's not going to change, okay? Don't expect it to change because it's not. We're going. I'm confident with our. I want to say alliance with that rogue AI that we're going to live forever. So you can expect us from now until eternity every single Monday.
I think that's fair.